Hey everyone, hope you're enjoying your Monday off because of today's wintry weather and all that good stuff. The great thing about this being a flipped classroom is that you know what? We can keep on going. I know it probably isn't the first thing you want to do on a snow day, but as we've said all along, we are right on schedule to be where we need to be by the time the AP exam shows up. So let's keep on trucking. Um, this is what we would probably go over today in class. So actually today I'd planned on reviewing since we've missed so much in the last few days. So this is probably what you would be watching tonight. I would probably be recording it maybe right now to post by this afternoon, but we're just moving on. So anyways, I just wasted about a minute of time, and I don't want to do that. Today we're going to talk about the physiology and the drive of hunger. This is sort of an extension of what we've been talking about last 2 or 3 days on different motivations and drives. We're going to talk about from here on out for this unit, we're going to talk about hunger probably today. We're going to talk about reproduction and sex probably tomorrow. And then we're going to get into emotions Thursday or Friday maybe with some activities. I'm actually liking being able to do these because I've got some neat activities planned for class. But anyways, we're going to go ahead and start with the psychology of hunger. Or I'm sorry, the physiology of hunger, how hunger works. We've talked about in chapter 2 with the endocrine system, and really the psychology of hunger, the biological part really deals with the endocrine system, a lot of those hormones and a lot of those blood chemicals really have a large impact on hunger. Now there's some questions on what's first and what's second and all that. I think we've talked a little bit about that previously. I'm not going to rehash that. But we're going to go over sort of what we definitely know, the mechanics of it. I may have mentioned this. I can't remember where I stopped with the last video. But anyways, glucose. Whenever you see glucose, that is essentially blood sugar. That is the sugar that is in your blood. It's a type of sugar that's in your blood that your cells use to power themselves. It's sort of like the coal in the furnace or whatever. It's the packages of energy. Well, the pancreas, but it can't be used on its own. The pancreas has to break it down using insulin. So if you know people with diabetes, a lot of times there's an issue with insulin. People have to take insulin shots. So you've got the glucose flowing through your blood, but it can't be used in its present state. So the pancreas produces insulin, which breaks down the glucose so that it can be used by your cells in your body. It does convert some to stored fat, which again is essentially stored energy that can be used at a later date. When your blood sugar, your glucose runs low, your stomach, your liver, and the intestines all say, you know what, we're running low on glucose. You have to get some energy, or you have to get some sort of, you're running low. We need some more, and a lot of times that's how hunger happens. The hypothalamus, we've talked about this also in chapter 2. Govern the endocrine system, re-regulates all the all the glands, all the other chemicals sort of flowing through your body. It is linked to emotion and some of the drives that it sort of monitors and that it regulates, and things like eating, drinking, body temperature. So when your glucose level is low, when your body hydration level is low, and it regulates the body temperature. And it also, at the same time, monitors the body's other hormones, especially the appetite hormones. So, again, you've probably seen this before. Your pituitary is sort of almost right in behind the eyeball, and then here's your hypothalamus extending up and underneath that. So, some different parts of the hypothalamus. The lateral hypothalamus stimulates hunger, and what we found is that in rats, if you stimulate that area, the rats will continue eating even after they are full, even after they have a decent amount of glucose in the system. They will still continue to eat. So the lateral hypothalamus is responsible for that drive for hunger. However, if you destroy the hypothalamus, stimulate means to activate. If you destroy it where it doesn't work at all, then rats would end up starving. They just would not eat. They wouldn't have that drive to eat, and then they would essentially starve to death. So some interesting research done on rats. But that's not the only part that deals with hunger. There's a few different areas. The lower mid hypothalamus, also known as the ventromedial, which is essentially sort of the same thing, lower mid. Medial means mid. But lower medial hypothalamus, the lower mid hypothalamus or ventromedial hypothalamus, it depresses hunger. When you stimulate that, you stop eating, and when you destroy it, you will eat to obesity. So it's just the opposite. All right. The lateral hypothalamus, if you stimulate it, you eat to obesity, and if you destroy it, you starve to death. But the ventromedial hypothalamus, if you stimulate it, you stop eating, but if you destroy it, you will eat to obesity. The ventromedial or lower mid hypothalamus is your brakes, is your hunger brakes. And here those areas are blown up. So there are some hormones and chemicals that are, sorry about that, I'm trying to get comfortable, that our body produces to sort of help us regulate ourselves. I'm going to go over a few of them. The first one is ghrelin. This is a hormone that is secreted by an empty stomach, sort of arouses the hunger drive. So when your stomach is empty, it's going to start producing ghrelin, which then enters the bloodstream and goes to the brain, and it's monitored by your hypothalamus. Now, people who will get gastric bypass surgery often produce less ghrelin, which means they will have that hormone will not be secreted as much, so they will not feel as hungry. It's sort of one of the shortcuts that doctors will have used in the past to help people lose weight. So, but with gastric bypass surgery equals less ghrelin. Orexin stimulates hunger. This is activated by low glucose. So again, you got low glucose in the body. It creates, or your body creates orexin again, which is read by your hypothalamus. Leptin is a chemical secreted by fat cells. Now this suppresses hunger. When you start getting fat cells being deposited, they start being they release this chemical, and your body says, hey, we've got plenty of energy, plenty of glucose, let's sort of stop eating. And so that sort of suppresses that hunger drive. And then PYY is a digestive hormone. This also suppresses hunger. So when you are digesting food, this is released and it suppresses hunger. And here's where this is all created. Of course, we've talked about insulin and its breakdown of glucose is secreted in the pancreas. Ghrelin, leptin here, the PYY in the lower intestines, and orexin is in the up around around the pituitary gland area. Now, there are theories on hunger and body weight. You know, some of you interested in maybe losing weight. I know I am. Found some of this pretty interesting. For a long time, there was this idea that everybody sort of had a set point for their body. There was a place where your body would adjust its food intake and or its metabolism to sort of stay at a certain weight. And if you didn't eat enough or worked out too much, then your metabolism would actually slow down to stop the burning of all the energy and stop the burning, to stop essentially the burning of the fat. Or it would reverse if you eat or going through a time where you're eating too much and not exercising enough, your metabolism would speed back up to sort of, again, keep your body in sort of this homeostasis, this sort of this balance. You'd have less food, you'd have a rise in hunger, fall in energy. In a 9-month study, and people were half of their food intake was cut. So if you averaged 3,500 calories, then you were given 1,650 calories a day. And what they found was about 25% stayed at around a set point. Now, what that also means is that 75% of them changed. So essentially, that set point idea is sort of an outdated, has been pretty outdated. Most psychologists would say that's probably no longer the case. Another thing to know is your basal metabolic rate. This is the energy expenditure at rest. So how much energy you spend just living, all right? When you're asleep, when you're sitting in your desk, this is when you're at rest. Now, obviously, that's going to change if you go to gym or if you go play softball or basketball or even if you're walking around a whole lot. Okay, that's going to change. But your basal metabolic rate is how much energy you expend at rest. So, and there's and you see this, a lot of times this is sort of included in some of your Fitbits and maybe your Apple Watch health things where they tell you how many calories you burned. I don't know how accurate those are, but there's at least an attempt to try and keep track of that. So this brings us to the hunger motivation. There are 3 essentially things that kind of help shape our motivation in hunger. The first one we've talked about at length. That's the biological center. Again, your hypothalamus is monitoring all these chemicals going throughout your blood. Your appetite hormones. You get stomach pangs, all that stuff. The whole idea of maybe a set or settling point of weight, universal attraction to sweet and salty foods. I mean, we are attracted to those. They taste good to us. There's a reason why one of my favorite snacks is the sweet and salty trail mix. It's just good. And then we also have sort of a wariness of novel foods. So that's all sort of shapes our eating behavior, but there's some other things too. The psychological approach. These are things that are not necessarily biological, but they may be more of, psychological in our minds. The sight and smell of a variety of tasty foods. I love walking into my family's kitchen at times, especially around the holidays, or just certain sights and smells, and there's a lot of good memories go with that. The memory of time elapsed since the last meal, the fact I hadn't eaten in 4 or 5 hours has a psychological effect. I know I'm going to have to eat soon. And then, of course, mood. We've all had our times when you've heard of depressed eating or mood eating. Some people eat when they're in bad moods. Some people don't eat. Some people will, you've heard of that. I haven't eaten in like 3 days. Why? Well, my mamaw died or whatever. So those things will play into our eating behavior. And then finally, there are social cultural things that will affect our eating behavior. Culturally learned taste preferences. Um, we might see. I always like on Facebook every once in a while there'll be these things that pop up that say, these 10 things Americans eat that are disgusted by the rest of the world. Things like peanut butter, I can't remember what they are, but to me, I find them interesting. And then if you think about the other way, chocolate-covered fried grasshoppers are a delicacy in a lot of parts of the world. It's very, only rich people eat them. Supposedly they taste pretty good. I don't know. It's not something I'm going to try because that is not one of my culturally learned taste preferences. Don't plan on it. Of course, I say that, but at the same time, I also like saying I'll try anything once. I've traveled around quite a bit, especially in the Caribbean, with some of the stuff I do in the summers. I've eaten a lot of strange things. Generally, none of it tasted all that great. Of course, I'm used to a diet heavy in sugars and salts, and not curry. A lot of these Caribbean countries use curry spices and all that, so it's just not necessarily. It's more of a taste preference than anything. So, but those things will shape our eating behavior as well. Learned restraint in cultures idealizing thinness. Some people, if there is a culture that idealizes thinness, people will restrain from eating. You've heard of the term diet. That's part of it. Whereas then you go to the culture out in the Asian Pacific, or the South Pacific, the Maori, they had a tendency to idealize large people. So, it's a lot of it is culture. So those three things, there are biological effects, psychological will affect, and also the sociocultural things will affect our hunger and our motivation. Now, which leads us to eating disorders, and we'll get into these a little more when we get to other psychological disorders towards the end of the course. But I am going to at least mention these just because I think they need to be mentioned and we need to be aware of them. First one is anorexia nervosa. I think we've all know what these are. I just want to make sure we're all clear. This is an obsession of losing weight, and generally that's 15% or more. It's not just, hey, I'm going to go on a diet to get in this dress. It's an obsession with losing weight. And, in psychology, there are definitions on what obsessions are, and it has to fall into within that. Generally starts with a weight loss diet. There's always a negative self-body image or perfectionist standards. You all know the thin people that say I'm fat. There's one of two reasons for that. One, they're looking for attention, or two, they may actually have a piece of anorexia nervosa. So if you do know people who are especially thin, but are always suggesting that they are fat or out of shape, or they need to lose weight, that's something to keep an eye on. That's definitely something to keep an eye on. Usually this happens in adolescence, so your all's age group. And this occurs a lot in competitive or high-achieving families if there's a standard that has to be lived up to. I'm reminded of Andy from The Office. Andy Bernard, that was a very competitive, high-achieving family. He always was trying to do things to sort of live up to that, and a lot of times that could be we see this in weight, in body weight. Generally, 9 out of 10 times it is female. There are genetic and cultural theories that go along with this. Some theories suggest there may be some people are more inclined to anorexia nervosa than others. The other one is bulimia nervosa. This is characterized by the binge and purge. So you're going to binge eat. You know how we binge watch television. Well, people will binge eat, and they will eat and eat and eat. They'll overeat in one setting, and then they will purge it. So they will then vomit, go to a bathroom and vomit what they ate. This a lot of times they'll also use laxatives to sort of flush everything out, or then they'll fast for long periods of time, and then they will exercise to the nth degree. As a teacher, one of the things I look for is the same person needing to go to the bathroom after lunch every day. Usually I start looking to see how much they're eating, or even after breakfast. And so this is something that's a little bit easier to see from the outside, because you have behaviors that are repeated over and over. One of my good friends growing up through high school or in college suffered from bulimia nervosa, and it was a hard thing for her to break from. And a lot of it had dealt with self-image issues. It's usually, a lot of times it's somebody who diets a lot but has a tendency to break the diet restrictions. Well, I can't eat meat. Well, I'm going to eat 2 pounds of beef here in this one setting. That's a red flag for those of us who are looking out. A lot of times weight fluctuations will happen, but they're within or above normal ranges, so a lot of times you don't notice it. They may gain 10 pounds in 4 days and then lose 15 pounds in a week, but that's a lot of times they stay within that normal range, so it's hard to notice. A lot of times when they're binging, they're going to binge on sweet or high-fat foods. They will suffer from depression and anxiety. A lot of times that's one of the triggers. And then half of all anorexia victims also have bulimia symptoms. So a lot of times they run hand in hand. This is an example, and I knew a girl in high school who was, this is kind of what she might look like. She's got bones pretty much sticking out, but this is what she saw in the mirror. So obviously this is if you see this but hear somebody talking like they are much heavier than this, then there may be an issue. This is not a fat girl by any means. All right. And of course you've got cultural ideas that are sort of distorting reality. This is what you see here is one outline is the actual person, and then one outline is where they've photoshopped. So this is not healthy. This is actually unrealistic. These people are actually not this thin. And I know you've seen some Facebook ads or maybe videos, something that show the real picture and then the Photoshop picture, the one that actually goes on the magazine front, and it's doing damage, I believe. So then you have, excuse me, the BMI, body mass index. We're going to kind of close out with these last two slides. This looks at your weight and your height and converts it into sort of an index, and then it sort of tells you kind of where you are. I, right now, at the moment, am sort of right at the very top of this obese. It wouldn't take much for me to be morbidly obese. So I know I have to lose weight, but I'm going to try and do it healthily with exercise. I'm not going to starve myself because I just like to eat way too much. So, but it is January 8th, Monday. I weighed in on Thursday at school. We're in a little how much can you lose type thing with some of the teachers. So I'm going to try and lose at least 10% of that. So I think I weighed in at 280 pounds. So I'm going to try and lose 28 pounds by like spring break. So we'll see if it happens. It might be helpful if you all sort of encouraged and was be like, hey, coach, what'd you eat today, or whatever. What do you have to eat? And if you see me with a pop, shake your finger or something like that. But anyways, I'm not going to be unhealthy about it. This is just for my own edification. But you can kind of see where they want. I can't imagine. I will say this: I'm not entirely sold on the entirety of the BMI. I've always been even at my most, I would say my most in shape when I was in high school, I was still not at 100 and what was that, 168, something like that. No, I was never that small. So I think this is for a normal person. I would like to have thought that I was slightly more athletic than the normal person. I know I was stronger, but that doesn't really take that into account. And then, but the good thing about, I guess, the obesity, the BMI index, is that it does have a correlation with the risk of an early death. With the BMIs, the higher the BMI, the higher the risk of an early death. So I'm at about I'm at 2.5 times the risk of an early death. So again, that's one of the reasons why I would like to lose weight, would like to drop down some. But even for me, I would have to lose almost 100 pounds to be within the BMI, and that I would not look good at losing 100 pounds. I mean, I look good now, but I would look less good at 168 or whatever. I'm looking to maybe get around but we'll see where I can go. But anyways, that's where we are. The next video thing we're going to talk about reproduction and sex and emotional attachments and things like that, because that is a drive, and that is a drive that we'll be asked about on the AP exam. So anyways, hope you all are enjoying your day off. Hopefully we'll get to see you tomorrow. If not, then expect another video tomorrow. Y'all have a good rest of your day. Stay warm, stay safe. Peace out.